Hi, Lara. Nice to see you.
Hi, Kathy. Nice to see you.
We
Good
are
afternoon.
we are super excited to have this conversation with you, Lara. We really just have so many questions and thoughts that we want to engage with you on. But first and foremost, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk with us today.
Oh, thank you for asking me, Cindy.
Yeah, of course. Laura, before we kind of jump in with some questions and learn more about you, do you want to give our audience members kind of a quick and dirty introduction of yourself?
Sure. Absolutely. My name is Lara. I recently graduated from LVC with my master's in mental health and clinical counseling. I also work as a teacher full-time at Lebanon High School, and I've been in that school district for 18 years. I now own a private practice, and I'm working towards my full licensure for an LPC, but I own a private practice in Anvil as I accumulate those hours towards my full licensing.
Lots to unpack there, just in that intro. I wonder, in terms of a starting point, if we could just maybe start with the fact that you're a teacher and you're also a counselor and a private practitioner. Tell us what you are a teacher and you came to the field of counseling. Can you kind of talk about that journey? What started that?
Yeah, so I started teaching at Lebanon School District, and I was teaching English as a second language and also French. And it was my dream to teach French full time, and I was working towards that. And my school district had pulled the program. So I transitioned from teaching those things into teaching English full time. But it didn't really feel like my passion. So I was finding myself feeling a little less than professionally fulfilled at the job. And I decided it was time to kind of take some steps to branch out and find some new ways to, use my skills and learn more ways to, feel impactful to the community. So I found myself in August 2020 enrolling in the first cohort at LVC for mental health and clinical counseling to get my master's. And from there, I got my internship. I did that part-time as I worked my way through the master's program, and I've had a lot of help establishing now my private practice, which I do part-time, and I still teach full-time.
That is so amazing. It never ceases to interest me that when something that on the surface seems maybe like a negative experience, like the passion is draining a little bit from, what you're doing in your day to day, but how that can really serve as the impetus for change and growth and to, explore and try something new.
Yeah. Yeah. And it absolutely did. It did. I listened to, how I was feeling and really had to tap into what do I need now? And it's brought me to this path.
And that takes so much courage because, first of all, listening to yourself and really just that self-awareness alone, our inner self or whatever you want to call it speaks to us. And the fact that you were receptive to that messaging, is very impressive, but also just taking that leap. Sometimes it feels like a leap off a cliff and it takes a lot of courage and a lot of hard work. I mean, a 60 credit master's program plus all of the pieces to get licensed afterwards, which we're going to talk about. I mean, it's a huge dedication.
Yeah, that's true. Yes, it was. Thank you for
Wow.
acknowledging that.
Yeah, and for all the viewers, I was able to see all of Lara's hard work. Lara was and I were in the same program, so I was able to see what a hard worker, excellent clinical skills that she has. So it was great to have that kind of firsthand window into your experience.
Thank you, Cindy.
Yeah. So I wonder, I know I've shared with you that to me it's beyond impressive that you have a private practice as an LAPC. So you're kind of at that first tier licensure aspect, which is a really exciting part of the journey. But in my experience working with counselors in training, you are the second person I know who has established a private practice this early on. And so I'm filled with pride and curiosity and just really so amazed at the fortitude, at all of the skill that brought you to this point. So maybe we can kind of process that a little bit and share with all of the viewers what it was like to go through that, all of the hoops to get to opening up your private practice.
Yes, and having a private practice was not really where I thought I would land after getting my master's in this program. However, it really kind of came out of necessity. So it was the avenue that made the most sense to continue doing this and accumulating hours and be able to continue teaching as well. Um, so over Christmas break, I took the time to really look into what I needed to do to open up a private practice. I really relied on communities that were out there of counselors who've done the same. You've been a big help, as well as Dr. Carrie Smedley from Amble Psychological Services. So I've really leaned on people who have already been through there and that, or been through the same process and have the background knowledge. I found that to be very helpful for me. Um, Other than that is a lot of, starting a business, like a checklist. What do I need to do through the state? One thing that I did not really foresee was um, rent. I would need to find a place to rent to see clients face to face. So luckily, I found some space at Amble Psychological Services, and I rent some. I rent an office from there. So it's really just been a checklist, leaning on other people for advice and for guidance, and then everything really came together, and it's been a lot smoother than I thought it would be.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned that necessity was kind of the instigator in the process. It reminds me of the saying, I'm trying to remember it verbatim. Necessity is the engine for change or growth. I can't remember exactly, but I think that's really insightful that you were able to identify that. And, I'm kind of imagining you looking at the laundry list, the checkoff list, and kind of going through that. And what seems, when looking at a checkoff list, to some people to be overwhelming, kind of walk us through, like, going through and checking off and moving through all of those requirements.
Mhm. Well, the first and probably the most fun thing I did was design a brand and a name. That was a fun motivating factor in the beginning. And then working through, going into the state and seeing what I need to be a small business owner, going through all of those. It's really not that daunting if you take time to for me to make a list and check things off one at a time. And like I said, I needed that time over Christmas break to really do that, to dedicate my full brain power to that process. So taking the time, looking at the list, checking it twice, making sure everything was in order, and talking to other colleagues that have been through it.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. Leaning in on support, as you mentioned. Also, I can't emphasize enough. I sometimes make lists, and when there's a lot of items on that, I'm always like, I'll come back to that. I'll come back to that. And just the fact that you had winter break to go through some of these items shows that you're really responsible, organized, on top of things, have initiative. So I really applaud you for all of the above.
Thank you. Yeah, it was really just, one step at a time.
Let's go back to, you mentioned that creating a brand was really fun for you.
Right.
And I want to learn more about that.
Yeah. Well, so I started teaching English, and one of the books I had to teach, which I had never read before I had to teach it, was A Streetcar Named Desire. And the main character, her name is Blanche Dubois. And at the end of the story, she ends up having a mental breakdown and she's sent to an institution. If she had had the help that she needed, she would have been fine. But, the story took place in the late 40s, so it wasn't really something that we talked about at the time. Um, so I named my practice after her. So in French, so tied back again to French, her name means white woods.
That is so beautiful. I love every part of that story. I love that you really kind of the story resonated with you, her story resonated with you, and also that you are paying homage to people who might not have had the services at their fingertips for whatever reason. In Blanche's case, because of the time frame.
Yes. So yeah, she was, marginalized and she could not get the help that she deserved at that time.
Yeah, I think that's really inspirational, and it kind of really demonstrates who you are as a clinician and that accessibility and wanting to ensure
Mhm.
that all people are heard and seen and helped.
Yeah. 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 It
That's
really felt
amazing.
it really felt like a good fit.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when you first told me, and it felt so you.
Yeah. I agree. Thank you.
Yeah. So before I move on, Kathy, I didn't know if you had any questions or comments as we're kind of listening to Lara's story.
It's a really exciting journey. I wonder what has been the most rewarding part of starting the practice.
I think what has been the most rewarding is doing it and having it doing it on my own time, kind of being my own boss and being able to decide when I see clients, how I see clients, having the autonomy in the process has been really rewarding.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, I could imagine that that would probably be one of the biggest elements since you're currently a full-time
Yeah.
teacher, and just that autonomy really becomes key. It becomes a necessity as you framed it. So what does that look like in terms of you have kind of the 40-hour week during the academic year, and what does it look like in terms of your balance between that and the practice?
Mhm. So yeah, it can get busy. Right now I see between 5 to 7 clients a week, sometimes less, but I see clients in person Tuesdays and Thursdays and also some Saturdays.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really nice. I think it's good to kind of chunk out designated days. Um, Obviously, the consistency for clients is good, but also for you just to kind of get into a groove or a ritual.
Yeah. Yeah. And not have every day, committed to that, but having enough time where I don't feel like I'm spread too thin.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. And so we're seeing your lovely office in the background here.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, it is really nice. It feels really warm and cozy.
Yeah, it is. It's dark, but yeah, thank you very much.
No, I like it a lot. I've always admired whenever I've done a Zoom call with you, I admire kind of that backdrop. It's a nice change from, let's say, my barren white wall back here.
Yeah, won't find many white walls in my house.
So tell us a little bit about the clients that you see. Do you feel like you have maybe a niche, or are you still kind of developing what that looks like?
I'm still developing what that looks like. I have been working steadily with adolescents, and that's been very successful. Recently, I've taken on some older clients, which has also been going really well. So I'm really, still working that out. But I enjoy both or a broad age range, I should say.
Hmm. And even just looking at teenagers and the fact that you work with them and have such a firm knowledge base of working with teenagers as a teacher, and knowing what drives them and what frustrates them, and not to say that all teenagers are the same, but just even familiarizing yourself with that developmental age group makes sense that the crossover into counseling, and working with teenagers sounds like a really good fit.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's a bonus for me because I am with them every day. So it's almost like I have this like insight almost into what they go through, what they experience, even their lingo. I know. So it's a bit of it gives me some insight, I think, that maybe somebody who is not a teacher working with that age.
Oh, 100%. Can you give us a little um, example of kind of speaking the language? Like what would be helpful for today, for an individual who wanted to work with teenagers in terms of
Mhm.
trends or?
Like something that they say?
Yeah, something that they say, or maybe I don't know. I will show my lack of knowledge here, but like TikTok
Yeah.
stuff and
Yeah. Okay.
all
Yes.
that fun.
There is a lot of TikTok, and I will admit that I am not, I am not a master at TikTok or really how Snapchat works. But what is great about my clients, even my students, I'll ask them to show me or explain it to me, and they 100% will take the time and do that, and in a way that I don't feel is, um, like that I don't feel like embarrassed about it or anything like that. So I'm still learning that. But I have noticed that when adolescent clients say, "Oh, you clocked me," that means I got like I they feel heard and understood. So that means I'm doing a good job, I guess. In
Yeah.
therapy.
Oh my gosh, I love that. First of all, I probably would have thought clocked meant like punching somebody. That was, uh, like I have an antiquated understanding of that word, but the language does really come into play in terms of just being able to contextualize what they are saying.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I really like that you're curious about seeing their world. Sometimes if somebody, maybe an adult, is not on TikTok, it's easy to uh, think it's silly. But the fact that you're interested and you want to learn about them and their world really paints a picture of who you are.
Yeah, I think it's really important to be curious about what they're going through in their experience because I mean, ultimately, they're not that different from what we went through developmentally. It's just the tools and the other things that are accessible to them are different. The technology is massively different. So I think it's important to keep up with that as best as I can.
Yeah, I love that. That's really amazing. Kathy, I saw that you unmuted yourself.
I wonder how you manage your boundaries because you are in a small town, you are a teacher, you are a therapist, and how you as a professional navigate that.
Mhm. Well, I have had, friends ask if I would take on, their children. Of course, there are boundaries with that. But I have had, acquaintances and I have treated their children. So there is um there is definitely a boundary there when if I'm too close to somebody, then ethically I would not be able to treat them. Um, Also, always asking my supervisor. She's been so helpful with recommendations of what I should or who I should or shouldn't see and what kind of boundaries to keep in place.
I love that example of using supervision
Hmm.
to guide us, which we never lose
Hmm.
that need.
Yeah. And it is a small town, so there is going to be some of that where I know somebody who knows somebody who I'm treating, but it doesn't leave the room that I'm sitting in when I'm sitting with the client.
For sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, that is such a really good question and a really good point in terms of the size of the town. And as a teacher, maybe um, you'll one day come across a client who knows somebody who goes to your school or something along those lines. And so I feel like following the breadcrumbs, it just gets cozier when you're in a smaller town.
Mhm. Mhm. And if it's kind of feels like a close acquaintance, I'll discuss that with the client as well, so they know what to expect, or if they have any questions or concerns, we can certainly comb through that and discuss what that's going to look like.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think it's important, all of the above what you're talking about, and just the fact that communication and talking to your clients and your supervisor, and just really kind of chewing on the situation and making sure you're moving forward, really shows your dedication to ethics and that you really put a lot of thought into the everything that you do.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So Lara, tell us a little bit. So we know kind of the clients that you work with, and I'm really curious to hear more about your approach.
So my modalities that I use are a mixture of CBT, which is what I was trained on in my internship, and ACT. ACT is acceptance and commitment therapy, which is evidence-based. It's a sister to CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, but it's a little bit different in that ACT has 6 pillars um, to achieve what we call psychological flexibility. And one of the pillars is thought diffusion, which I thought we could maybe practice and exercise with that today, if you're willing, Cindy.
Oh, absolutely. I would love to do a role play. And I like that the way you phrased it in terms of how ACT is a sister to CBT. I like that it shows kind of that relationship. But it's also very different as well. And so kind of looking at that Venn diagram, if you will. Before we do our activity, I'm curious to know, can you tell us a little bit about how ACT is similar and different from CBT?
Yeah, so there's a lot of similarities, like mindfulness, um, committed action to values. One of the biggest difference is the approach to our thoughts. So in CBT, we try to analyze our thoughts, evaluate our thoughts, and then reframe them or change them. Where in ACT, it's not about changing the thought, but it's more about changing our relationship to the thought.
Yeah, I think that it on paper it sounds very similar, but in actuality, it's very different.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I feel like when you're trying to constantly reframe or change your thoughts, it's almost like you're embroiled in a battle. Whereas
Yeah.
this, you're coexisting with your thought. You're examining them. You're using curiosity. One of the things that I love about ACT is how creative it is.
Mhm. Yes, it's very experiential.
Yeah. Kathy, what are your thoughts about ACT and CBT?
Well, I think the important part is that you have a theoretical lens to guide you, whatever that will be. I don't know that I have a feeling one way or the other because I think, as I imagine we agree, things work differently for different people at
Mhm.
different times for different needs. So this could be the perfect match for a variety of issues that people are facing at different stages in their lives. And it sounds like this is something you can use with adolescents.
Yes, yes. Mhm.
Yeah, Kathy, I love that point. That's one of the things I love about theoretical frameworks in general is that they're so individualized, and it really gives you just many tools in your toolbox to use with different clients. Um, and Lara, I'm super excited to just jump in and practice and see firsthand what ACT is all about.
Okay. Are you ready then?
I am ready.
Okay. Um, if you have a piece of paper, that would be ideal.
I actually don't have a piece of paper. Can I just rely
Yeah.
on old Rusty here?
Yeah. Yeah, that'll do fine. Um,
Okay.
okay. So we're going to work on thought diffusion. So this is changing our relationships to our thoughts. One of this process is meant to create space and kind of like a perspective where we're looking at them instead of looking through them. Okay.
Nice.
Okay. So I want you to think of a self-critical thought that you've had recently. Um, and it can be something like, I'm not good enough, or gosh, I always mess things up. Pick one that resonates with you and that shows up for you.
Okay.
Okay. You have that one?
Yes. Do you want me to share it?
Yeah, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, I've been feeling very spread thin lately among a lot of different responsibilities, and I feel like sometimes when I'm feeling spread thin, I just start spinning and I don't really dive deeply into any one of them. And so I've been really kind of beating myself up about that in terms of maybe staying at the surface with different tasks.
So maybe something like, I'm not doing enough.
Yeah. 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 I like it. And it's ironic because I feel like I'm doing maybe too much. And as a result, I'm not doing enough in any one of them.
Okay. Okay. So I'm not doing enough. That feels accurate for you.
Yes.
Okay. So think about that thought, really hold on to it and notice how it makes you feel. Okay. Now here comes the diffusion part. What I want you to do is before that thought, I want you to add the phrase, I'm having the thought that.
Okay. I'm having the thought that I'm not doing enough.
Yeah. Okay.
Hmm.
How does that feel?
It feels more kind of distant or removed. Like when you first told me to get in touch with the feeling that way, I could feel like this like prickliness on my arms, like,
Mm.
but phrasing it like that makes it feel like I'm holding that thought or feeling at arm's length.
Okay. So maybe it was here before, and now it's out here.
Yes, yes.
Okay. We're going to take it one step further. So to add to that thought, you're going to say now, I notice that. So it will sound like, I notice that I'm having the thought that I'm not doing enough.
I notice that I'm having the thought that I'm not doing enough.
Okay.
Yeah, it almost feels like the first thought feeling that comes into my mind is like a helicopter view. Like I'm looking down at somebody else having having that feeling. Like I'm noticing, I'm looking at the window of the helicopter and I'm
Yes.
noticing that.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're the observer of your thought.
Yes.
You're not your thought,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Okay. So
Precisely.
it seems like, we were able to create some space and then really create some space with that second phrase that we added to the thought.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. It's almost like it did feel very tiered.
Mhm. Mhm. So that's one of the pillars of ACT. That's thought diffusion. So we're changing the relationship. Often our thoughts feel we're so enmeshed with them. And
Hmm.
feel like you pointed out right here, we're creating the space where we can look at them without having them interrupt us throughout the day. Um, or, throwing us off track. We're able to observe our thoughts instead of getting caught up in them.
Yeah, I like that. It really does feel because if you notice that you're having a thought, it almost feels like 6 degrees of separation. Like you're noticing something from afar. That's almost like you're outside of yourself while you're engaged in that process.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Mm-hmm.
I love that. That's a really good example. Kathy, what are your thoughts as you kind of view that technique?
I also really like how that allows for space. And again, while it would be helpful for everyone, I would really see the utility in that with adolescents and young
Yeah.
adults.
Yes.
And of course for everyone, but especially at that time where feelings sometimes have such an intensity that they tend to overtake us.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really, I can see with that population, especially how that could be really useful.
Yes. And they realize hopefully they have the choice that I don't have to believe this thought. It's not a fact.
And such
Yeah,
an important skill for them to learn.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like you said, Kathy, as a teenager, you just have those, big emotions, and there's so many changes that are happening. And can you share an observation of doing this with somebody? Have you seen Lara, them kind of in real time kind of start to remove themselves from the feeling?
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes, yes. I had one client in particular that comes to mind.
That's amazing. Wow. What I like about that is it's something that you can do with the client to maybe, de-escalate in the moment, but also it's something very doable that they can carry with them outside of the counseling session.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things I think that's great about both CBT and ACT. I feel like the doability of certain activities, or getting something down pat habitually. It doesn't require a big lift to do it when they're at school, or when they're at home.
Yes, the skills they become very accessible and, like you said, applicable to many different situations and environments. Mhm.
Yeah.
Really, like, skills to go.
Right, right. What can you tell us, what attracted you to act, to, because it sounds like you did CBT at your internship.
I did, yeah. So I took an ACT class at LVC. It just really, for me personally, resonated with me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's another component to ACT, which is values based. And I think, actually tying it back to my journey, how I got here from just being a teacher to now being a teacher and a therapist. I think that was something that I was not, for me personally, aligning with my values. So, while I didn't quite necessarily know what to call that then, that's what, put me on the path to where I am now. So I think kind of identifying that was interesting to me, and really resonated with me as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you saw firsthand what it was like to be misaligned with your values, and then once you became aligned with them, it was so impactful and meaningful for you. And so that's something that's really emphasized in ACT.
Yeah. Yep, exactly.
Can you share with us, what would it look like hypothetically if you saw a client that was misaligned with their values, and how would you kind of get them back on track?
So we would do some values discovery and talk about, what makes you feel alive, what gives you vitality. Think of a time when you were happiest or most proud. What was happening? What were you doing? And then from those experiences, we pull out values. So you might value, relationships. Well, okay, let's look at what your relationship is like now. Is it where you want to be? Are you showing up in that relationship and being the person that you want to be? And seeing how are if they're misaligned, and then steps we can take to move them to make toward moves to becoming who they want to be in a relationship and having the relationship that is, that brings them joy and happiness and aligns with the value.
Yeah, I think that sounds amazing. And I feel like sometimes people minimize the importance of certain contexts. So here's what I mean by that. Let's say you are working with somebody and they said, well, I feel most alive and vibrant when I'm hanging out with my friends and we're, eating and watching Netflix. But that's not an important activity, and so they might minimize that. Like, what would you see in that scenario? Like, what would you pull from that?
Yeah, so like what about that is so important. So take me back to that time when you're sitting there watching Netflix. What were you thinking? What were you feeling? What about that time felt so good to you? And maybe it's the camaraderie, maybe it's, just sharing time, sharing space with people that are important to you. So we really try to pull out the specific value. And a lot of times we can confuse values with goals, and goals are things we can check off a list, but values are things like we're constantly working towards. So being a good friend, having, sharing my time and my space with people who are important to me. Those aren't things that, we really once and done like a goal, but they are, actions that we align with that bring us joy.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I do think people use the concept of values and goals kind of interchangeably. And that would be confusing to think, well, it's not my goal to eat snacks with my friends, but being able to kind of strip down to kind of the bare elements, what's there, that's meaningful to you, that maybe we can extend to other contexts.
Mhm.
I love that. It sounds like, what I really like about your approach, Lara, is it sounds like not only is it really effective, but there's a lot of discovery. Like, you're really open to the discovery of what your clients are saying, and just aligning them in a direction that would best meet their needs and be genuine to who they are.
Mhm. Yeah, I really love, getting to know their stories and, getting down into scratching the surface and seeing who they are and ways to kind of reflect to them who they are and who they want to be.
That's amazing. I can see how passionate you are about really establishing that rapport, that relationship, and really kind of helping people step into the best version of themselves.
Mhm. Yeah, it's very rewarding.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, do you want to advertise for your practice?
Sure.
Or
So
you don't have to, but if you want to,
yeah, I mean my practice is White Woods Counseling Services in Annville. Yeah, so you can find my website. It's Whitewood Counseling Services. If you're interested, I also have a Facebook page where I put out content. So little tips and tricks. Maybe you would find that useful. You can check that out too.
thank you.
And I can say I've looked at your tips and tricks. They are really useful. They're really grounded in just kind of a step by step how to that it's not too academic or too kind of dense. It's very accessible and very relatable. The tricks and tips that you provide on your LinkedIn and your social media sites.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Yeah. So, Laura, also one thing I'd love to ask you before we wrap up, what advice do you have for maybe somebody who was in your shoes, let's say a couple of years ago. Let's see, when did you graduate? August of 23, was it? So let's say you have somebody who's it's August of 25 and they're graduating. What would be some, and let's say they aspire to start a private practice and they are really, what you're saying really speaks to them. What would be some advice that you'd like to give them?
I think my advice would be to network, talk to other counselors, other professionals who have been there. Even like finding a good accountant is really important. So I think networking, having a great support system is what really allowed me to take the step.
That is amazing. You know, sometimes when we think of practitioners, it feels like you're on an island by yourself.
Yeah.
And so I think that message is really important to network with other people in the field as well as other people in different fields
Mhm.
that could be, helpful to you advancing your practice.
Mhm.
That's amazing. Well, we are just so thrilled that you were able to share your story and share your just really amazing success, all of the accomplishments that you've undergone. It really, I mean, they ring loud and clear in and of themselves.
Thank you. I'm really like honored that you asked me.
Well, I'm honored that you said yes.
Thank you for sharing and telling your story and teaching about ACT and promoting good mental health for everyone across the life cycle.
Absolutely. And thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you, Laura. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to
Your
connecting
success.
soon. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Well, you take care, Laura, and we will be in touch soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Take care.
Bye. Take care.